Okay, so we are identifying linear and slopes. So if you look at the first part of this, y'all, it talks about linear equations in two variables, which just means standard form. Okay, it's where a, b, and c are real numbers, and a and b are not both 0, meaning a can be 0 and b can be 0, but they can't be 0 at the same time, yes? So you have to have an x or a y. The graph of the linear equation in two variables is a straight line, because that's what a linear line is. Pretty much the rule is, y'all, there can't be anything funky to your x or your y. So if you look, I mean, like, you can't have an exponent, you can't have a square root, you can't have a fraction with one on the top, one on the bottom. As long as x and y have a number in front, or one of them has a number in front, and it equals something, 0 is a possibility, then it's linear. So if you look here, is this in standard form? It's decimals, but if you look, it's in standard form. You have x and y on the same side, and it equals something else. So this is linear. Now, x and y aren't on the same side, but is it written as a linear equation? Yeah, it's just a y equals, so this is also linear. What about this one? No, why not? The squared on my y. Remember, I said nothing funky to our x and our y, so this is not linear. And what about this one?
Yes.
Yeah, y is 0, but is x there?
Yes.
Yeah, and it said as long as both are not 0, so this is also linear. That's literally it. Okay, as long as there's nothing weird to your x and y, you're good. Okay? Okay, so now we're actually going to talk about slope of a line. Some refreshers, the equation is rise over run, or change in y over change in x, or y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, as long as x2 does not equal x1. Okay, and I'll explain what that means here in a second. So, again, rise over run, up is positive, down is negative, left is negative, right is positive. Think about your graph. Okay, if you have a graph, an xy axis, isn't this the positive side for x and the negative side for x? It's the same. Positive for y, negative for y, it's the same. Okay, so if you're going up, it's positive. If you're going right, it's positive. Down and left are negative. Okay, positive slope goes uphill, left to right. Negative slope goes downhill, left to right. Horizontal is a 0 slope. Remember, we talked about this, hoi. It's a y equals equation, and it's a 0 slope. And then vertical is vux. It's undefined, and it's an x equals equation. So that's your vertical line, and it's undefined. Okay, so if we actually look at the graphs, we have these. So I'm going to show you how to find it from a graph. Hopefully this is just refresher. So if I go, it says rise over run, so if I'm going to start at the bottom and I rise 1, 2, 3, 4. So I went up 4, and I go left 1, 2, 3. Well, if I go left, is that positive or negative? Negative. So my slope is rise, which is 4, over run, which is negative 3. But what I want you to see is that I could have started at that top dot. It doesn't matter where you start. And I could have gone down 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, down 4 is what? Negative. And then right 3, 1, 2, 3, which is positive. So is this also equal to negative 4 over positive 3? Are those equal? Yeah, if you type it in your calculator, y'all, it's going to literally put the negative in the middle, because it doesn't matter if it's top or bottom. So I want you to realize it doesn't matter where you start. If you start at the top and work your way down or up, it doesn't matter. Okay? Yes? Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so if we look at this one, okay, I'm going to rise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Did I count right? Did y'all get up 5?
Yes.
And then right 1, 2. So what's my slope? 5 over 2.
Wait.
I know the lines aren't the best, and that makes it a little hard. Now what about this one?
Or x, sorry.
Well, technically, if you count up or down, do you go up or down? No, so you have 0 over 1, 2, 3, or 4, 3. What's 0 divided by 3?
0.
Yeah, if you do 0 divided by 3, it's just 0. So what's my slope? 0. Now, another thing I want you to realize is that this is a Hoy, which is a 0 slope, and you could also make a z for 0 out of your line. Okay. Well, what about this line? Well, technically I go down 4, which is -4, over, did I go left or right at all? 0. And if you type -4 divide 0, it says error, because it's not allowed. And that's why this is an undefined slope, because you can't do that. Undefined. And it's because it's Vux, which is undefined. You can also make a U out of your line.
On the Hoy, wouldn't x equal or y equal 3?
No, it'll be -1. It's wherever it crosses the y-axis.
Oh.
So this would be x equals 2, and this would be y equals -1.
Where did we get that 3 from?
I went from that dot to dot, which I just covered up with my black line. Technically, though, there's a dot at every intersection, so you could have done 1. It doesn't matter. It'll always, because 0's on top, it doesn't matter what number's on bottom. Okay, so let's look at the next piece. So now it's telling me 2 points. So if I give you 2 points, how do you find your slope? Well, this is your formula. It's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. However, it doesn't matter which point you label your first point and which point you label your second point, as long as that point stays lined up. You see how my y and my x are lined up? My y2 and x2 are lined up? They have to be lined up with themselves or it won't work. If you flip-flop one of them, it's going to be wrong. So I always label x1, y1, x2, y2. Well, what's my y2? -3 minus what's my y1? 5. Over what's my x2? Minus what's my x1? So you could do this by hand. What's -3 minus 5? -8. And then what's this? What happens here with this double negative? It becomes a broken plus sign. What's 2 plus 1? 3. Well, -8 over 3 does not simplify, so my slope is -8 over 3. Now, you could have also just plugged it in and then done alpha y equals enter, -3 minus 5 over 2 minus -1. And did it give me the exact same thing? Yeah. So if you just plug it in, you can type it in your calculator and get your answer. Okay, so let's try this next one. X1, Y1, X2, Y2. What's Y2?
4.
Minus what's Y1? And what's X2?
2.
Minus what's Y1? X1, -1. So if I type that in, alpha y equals enter, 4 minus -2 over 2 minus -1, I get 2. And the reason I get 2 is because if I do this by hand, this becomes 4 plus 2, which is 6, over 2 plus 1, which is 3. And what's 6 over 3 simplify to? 2. Pretty simple, yes? Okay. Number 3 and 4 are my special cases. Do you notice that your y's match here? When you notice your y's match, or if you notice your y's match, you can stop and you can tell me hoy. Because what do the y's equal? 1. So if they both equal 1, doesn't that mean it's going to stay a height of 1 forever? Yes, so that means it's a horizontal line, which is a 0 slope. So I know my slope is 0. However, I'm going to show you mathematically if you don't notice. So x1, y1, x2, y2. So we have 1 minus 1 over 3 minus negative 3, which ends up being 0 over, this becomes plus 6. And remember, I said that we can have 0 on top. So one thing to know is that it is okay to have 0 on bottom because it just equals 0. So if we have 0 over 6, it just equals 0. And if you type it in your calculator, it's going to tell you 0 as well. Okay? Now, on this one, you'll notice that your x's match. So if we try to find this one, and we have 6 minus 2 over 4 minus 4, well, I get 4 over 0. Well, if I type that in my calculator, what happened the last time? It said error, and it's because it's not okay to have 0 on bottom. Okay, that equals undefined. So my slope is undefined. Because this is going to equal error. And it's because this is your special case of Bucks, because the x's were equal. Okay, flip to the back.
What is that?
Match, the match. Okay, if we look here, now we have slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. We like this form because as long as y is by itself, we don't have to do anything to fix it. So when y is by itself, m is my slope. And what is m always touching? The x. So is y by itself here on number 1? Yes. So what's my slope? 3/4. Is y by itself on number 2?
Yes.
So what's my slope? Negative 2/3. It's whatever touching my x. Now here's y by itself. No. So I have to get y by itself. How do I get rid of this negative? Yeah, you can multiply or divide by a -1. Okay, 2 negatives makes it positive, so this becomes positive y. 5 divided by -1 is -5. -2 divided by -1 is positive 2. So if you'll notice, it just changed all the signs to opposite. So if it's easy to get y by itself, you could just do whatever you need to do, get y by itself. Then, what's my slope now that y is by myself? -5. Now, if it's easier to put it in standard form by just getting x and y on the same side, I'm going to show you how to find your slope from standard form. So don't let this stress you out. It's actually super simple. When in standard form, remember we said it's ax plus by equals c, right? Well, slope in standard form is opposite of a over b. So did I change b? Is b opposite? No, only a. And I put a negative when I say opposite because what do 2 negatives make? A positive. So if a was negative and I put a negative there, then 2 negatives would make a positive. Now what's a positive that I give a negative to? It becomes negative, right? So it's going to make it opposite with that negative. So here, what's my a, what's my b? A is 3, b is -4. So what's the opposite of positive 3? Over exact b is -4. 2 negatives makes a. So my slope is 3/4.
Why would we change A, but we don't change B?
Because that's just the formula for it. Opposite of a over b. And it's because, well, okay, I can tell you why. It's because if you solve for y, wouldn't you move x by doing the opposite? So how do you move a positive 3x? Negative 3x, and then you divide by what's exact with your y. So that's your mathematic reason. Okay, so here, what's the a? And what's b? Okay, so what's the opposite of a? Negative 5 over exact b. 2. Now, if it simplifies, should you simplify it? Yes. Any questions with those? Okay, so special cases. If we have an x equals equation, what's the acronym for that? VUX. So what's your slope? What does that U stand for? Undefined.
For the first one, or equation 1, why do you think it's A and B? 3 points.
Huh? Because opposite of positive 3 is negative 3. And exact b is negative 4. 2 negatives makes a positive. Okay, now what's my acronym for y equals equations? With no x. Oh, HOI. Why was I writing VUX again? HOI. And what does that middle stand for? 0 slope. Okay, last thing is parallel lines have what? The same slope. Okay, if I have a slope of 2 over 9 or 2 over 9, as the other slope's 2 over 9, they're parallel. Yes, they'll never touch. Okay, perpendicular lines have negative reciprocals. I usually say opposite reciprocals, kind of like with a over b. Didn't I say opposite of a, but I labeled it negative? Same thing. So I say opposite reciprocal because that makes more sense. Reciprocal. What is this reciprocal? Do y'all remember? You just flip it. So opposite, flip. So if you look, I have a positive 4 over 1. What's the opposite of positive? Negative, and then it flipped it, went to 1/4. So these are opposite reciprocals. So I'm going to give you examples of some that are and some that are not. So perpendicular is like if you have 3, the opposite reciprocal of that is negative 1/3, because how else can I write 3? Can't I write it over 1? So this is positive, that's negative, and it flipped. 3 over 1 flips to 1 over 3. Yes? Okay, yeah, so things that are not perpendicular are things like negative 3 and positive 3. Well, yes, they're opposite, but did it flip? No, because technically 3 is 3 over 1, and this is also 3 over 1. Did it flip? No, so make it a fraction if it's not already a fraction. So these are not perpendicular, but yes, they're opposite, but they did not flip. Has to do both. So you could also have 2 over 3 and 3 over 2. They flipped, but are they opposite? No. So they have to be both. They have to be opposite, they have to flip. Yes? Okay. So knowing that, let's look at these 3 equations on the bottom, or the 3 set of equations, and figure out if they're parallel, perpendicular, or neither. Okay? So knowing that, what's my slope of this first line? Yeah, y is by itself, so it's just negative 1 over 5. Now this standard form, what's my a? And what's my b? 10. So what's opposite of a? Over exact b, 10. And what does that simplify to? Negative 1 over 5. What do you notice about the two slopes? They're equal, so they're parallel. Any questions with that? Okay, so let's look at this next one. Okay, so here, if there's no number in front, remember you can always put a 1. So A is 1 and B is 1. Well, what's the opposite of 1? Negative 1 over 1. Now you could simplify that and say it's just negative 1, but I like to leave it as a fraction. It makes more sense. Okay, so down here, there's no number, so again, I could put 1. And I have opposite of, negative 1 is my A, B is 1. Well, what's the opposite of negative 1? Over exact B is 1. Well, here's my question. Are they opposite?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one's negative, one's positive. If you flip 1 over 1, what is it still? So did it technically flip? Yes. So this is perpendicular. This is the only weird one that looks the same. Okay, and last one. What's my A and B here? A is 3, B is 1. So what's the opposite of A? Negative 3 over B is 1. So my slope here, opposite of A, is negative 2 over B is 3. Are these opposite? No. Are they reciprocals? No. Are they equal? No. So what's my answer? Neither. Or neither. Either way. Okay, so that's it today. That's your slope notes.